In the summer 2023 issue of Postscript magazine, we presented a health and community survey. We had lots of involvement, lots of responses, and we were able to capture the survey results. We're going to have Tim Anderson, who developed and presented the survey, to cover some of the highlights of the survey, but in particular, interests around housing. He's going to introduce two special guests after presenting some of the highlights of the survey, and we'll have some more coverage and discussion on housing. Very interesting topic. We will have time for questions after the housing presentation. So again, welcome Tim Anderson, Executive Director of the BCRTA.
Well, thank you very much, Dave, and thank you for all the good work you've been doing hosting our conference today, and thank you for not using your joke book more often than you needed to. Thank you very much. Our health and community survey was an extremely successful outreach on the part of our association. As Dave noted, it was in our summer postscript issue, and people could fill out the paper forms or they could answer online. And we had a staggering 1,900 plus responses. So this is a very statistically significant survey. And I think it's really useful to us to understand, at least from the perspective of members of our association, where their standing is in terms of their feelings about their health, healthcare, their place in the community, and the concerns they have around all those issues. So I do encourage you to check out the fall issue of Postscript, where we have a 4-page spread outlining the results of that survey. So today I just want to drill in on a few of the points that were covered in that survey, because I think they really do illuminate the context for today's discussion, specifically around housing for seniors, for retirees, and particularly transitional housing. We'll see a little bit how the question isn't, at least for our members, that there's not housing for them at the moment. The question more is the context in which they want to adjust their housing situation, the context in which they're financially bound by their housing situation or the housing situation of people they care about. So again, I do encourage you to see the more fulsome survey results in the fall 2023 issue of our magazine. And let's talk about some of the specific issues to do with housing. Well, on the topic of Home Sweet Home, our retirees in the BC Retiree Association, 17,000 plus people, are in a particularly fortunate position considering the volatile BC real estate market, because fully 93% of our members live in a home that they own. And this gives them certainly a high degree of financial security, or at least housing security. And if they have what they call housing precarity, or the likelihood that they will lose their housing, it's probably not due to financial reasons. It has more to do with whether they can keep up life in that context. And in fact, we find that about 88% of our members want to stay exactly where they are. They are quite happy with their present circumstance and don't see themselves moving soon. One of the interesting factors about this question, when we talk about housing, we talk about it like it's an economic commodity that can be traded, which is true, and it has an exchange value of a certain number of dollars, but we use the word home differently. And so when people own their own homes, it means they're at home where they are. And you can see that in this next stat, where 70% of our retirees report that they know most of their neighbors. That's an extraordinarily high number in 21st century Canada and North America. In some cities, I've seen reports that if you look in certain segments of downtown core areas in North America, maybe 9% would say they know most of their neighbors. We live in a much more anonymous world where people's housing and circumstance is more on that exchange value. The home is a economic commodity, and we don't have those same community ties. So you can start to see that there's an overlay. It's about more than money when we're talking about people staying in their own homes. Another element, of course, if we want to switch back to the other side of that conversation, is that most of our members are in good financial health. One of the privileges that a retired person who has taught in the public school system in British Columbia, one of the benefits they have is having the most secure, most inflation protected, secure pension. It's unequaled in Canada. I mean, Ontario might be a close second, but certainly BC has an extremely well-funded pension plan, full coverage for the cost of living. And when you factor that in with the cost of living coverage for your OAS and your CPP, it means for most of our members, they are quite well protected, and with 93% of them owning their own home, we've got some equity behind that as well. And now, that's not uniform. We have a number of people in our association who maybe only work part-time, or they stepped away from their job to raise children, or they got into their career late. So while we can make a sweeping statement that our teachers are well off and well funded, we do recognize that there's a range of what people are experiencing there. Okay, so let's switch now to some of the pressures that people are feeling about housing. We've been talking more about the rosy side of it in terms of our members, but in terms of our members' felt needs and concerns about this, it's really interesting that 42% of the people reporting said they had property tax concerns. Now, as much of us as we like to support, all the good work the government does for us, I don't think any of us really enjoys paying tax. And as each of us sees our standard property tax bill go up year after year, it becomes a concern. So the next item is interesting because one of the great options for people over, is it 55 or 60, maybe 60, in British Columbia is that you can defer your taxes. And by deferring your taxes, yes, you are, in a sense, incurring a debt. You're encumbering your property with that amount owed so that when you sell off that property, that amount will have to be repaid. However, the interest rate on those funds is extremely low. And so for people who have a cash flow issue, deferring your taxes is a really super strategy to save a few thousand in cash flow each year. You will be a little bit surprised when you go to do that you're still paying your water bill, your garbage bill, a bunch of things, and you realize that your whole property tax bill isn't just the tax portion. There's a number of other fees there that you can't get out from under. But it's a little bit remarkable that nearly half the people register a significant concern, but only 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 is actually taking advantage of this program that is a very affordable way to manage your cash flow. So that might be something you want to look into if that is a pressing concern for you. Next item is something that was both surprising to me and not surprising to me. And that is nearly a third of the people who responded to our survey report that they are continuing to provide financial support to family members not in their household. That's a really significant amount, particularly when you look at the next item, which is how many of those people are getting financial support from outside of their household, and that's only 2%. So really, when you're looking at providing financial support to other family members, some of our retirees will be in the more advanced cohorts, so it would be children or grandchildren that they're giving support to, maybe a sibling if that's their family circumstance. There's a number of people who are caught in the middle, the kind of sandwich generation, where they're helping to care for their elderly parents who may be running out of money themselves, and then trying to get their kids established. And one of the factors that I think that looms large is that kids of, say, my children's generation in their 30s, how do they get a foothold in a housing market where the average house is $1.5 million? I mean, it's kind of crazy to do that without some help from the bank of mom and dad. So that creates some pressure on our retirees, that their consideration is not just their own future, but considering the present needs of people they care about. So it's not free sailing for all our retirees. And that, I think, leads to our last point. You would, in one sense, expect that a demographic where 93% of the people own their own home would have no concerns about skyrocketing housing prices and the availability of housing. But in fact, the squeeze is on. And so you get a lot of people who are house rich, but maybe not feeling quite as cash rich, maybe feeling even cash poor as they maintain that house and maintain all these other concerns. So if we're going to summarize then and think about how people are taking action, we then move to another layer of inflection on this question of housing. And that is when your present circumstance isn't adequate for the need that you're going to have tomorrow. In other words, there may come a time where you really ought to move, or there's an opportunity to move that would give you a better situation, or you have no choice but to move from your present circumstance. And so we asked a series of questions, and the results were, I have to confess, a bit sobering to me, because teachers are known for throughout their career of having to be organized, and they have to know what's going to happen tomorrow. There's teachers who show up in the classroom and they don't know what's happening today or tomorrow are not going to be successful teachers. So one would hope that you're able to apply those skills and that mindset to deal with that most important planning opportunity, which is the planning for your own housing, for your own personal circumstance. But what we found is that maybe people aren't really aggressively pursuing that. We asked, do you have an emergency plan if you or your spouse or you and your spouse suddenly have some medical issues? Do you have some kind of backup plans of what you like to see happen next? Do you have a plan to get some action taken in that regard? And only 8%, 1 out of 12, said they had some kind of emergency plan. Further along, if you want to stay in your home, which nearly 9 out of 10 of our members want to do, well, the best way to do that, and we heard about this last year from Sue Lance, you might recall the Options Open presentation she had on aging in place, where she talked about at a very early age, building all your options, getting that quiver of arrows full so that you can deal with circumstances before you're in a crisis. So that means getting extra help in your home so it doesn't become too much for you. Thinking about your transportation support, things like that, so that you're not waiting for your driver's license to get lost before you figure out what you're going to do next. How many people have researched home support? 1 out of 8. Independent living, and our next guest can probably speak to the dynamics of this certainly better than I can. But independent living is a really useful intermediate step for many people who don't want all the burden and pressures of maintaining their own household and running their own kitchen every day. And so they want to have some options. And so independent living is a great option for a lot of people in terms of socialization as well. Isolation, we know, gets to be a problem. And if you're just barely hanging on to life in your own home and not able to get out, you're really at risk to get isolated. One of the other stats that showed up in our survey was a little bit shocking, that nearly half of our people, 44%, reported that their social networks had become smaller in the last 2 years. That's a really significant number. So independent living might be a good solution to look at for a number of people when they get to that phase of life. And then, of course, just as we were talking about people not working in isolation in terms of their financial considerations or their other needs that they have in terms of their family, we asked the question, have you discussed the plans that you have for yourself with your family members so that they can be of support to you, they can give you some encouragement, maybe be a resource to help you research those things? And that number was a bit higher, which is encouraging, but it's still less than a third. And we did also see a number of responses. You'll recall in that survey that we had some blank spots on the bottom of the survey where people could write in their comments or write in their own questions and so on. So we get a lot of feedback. And of course, we always get feedback on the questions we didn't ask. You didn't ask me this question. You should have asked me that question. So thankfully, those people gave us the answer to the question we never asked. And the question they wished we asked is, are you caring for your aged parents? And there it was. We are guilty of ageism. We assumed that because our members were retirees, we forgot how many of them are actually caring for their own parents as well. And we got a lot of comments about that the most tiring thing in our members' life was not caring for themselves. It's all the work that they're doing to care for their debilitated parent and trying to arrange things for parents or convince their parents to get help and so on. And a lot of those situations we know from the experience you may have had in your family or in your friends' families or whatever, come from that lack of conversation that should have taken place before things got to the level they're at now. And so that pre-planning can reduce a lot of the stress of trying to put Band-Aids on a situation when it develops. And sometimes just life unfolds or unwinds or collapses in such a way that you have to deal with things sort of on an emergent basis. But there's a lot we can do to provide stability to ourselves if we plan. So let's hope that our generation continues to do as well or better than previous generations at looking at those issues. So I just want to highlight some takeaway points that I took from our survey as they inflect on the issue of housing and particularly on the issue of housing for retirees and its different forms. The first one is that a tough housing market actually affects everyone, because it affects our community. You want to go get a coffee, how can they hire somebody to work in that shop if housing is so unaffordable that no potential employee could work there? It's a problem. It affects you if you want to have your kids have a financial future, own their own home. It's going to affect you and your plans. What are you going to do with your money? Are you going to sit in your comfortable home while your kid lives in a basement suite until they're 50 years old? You know, it's tough. Many retirees have complicated finances. That's a related point. People are encumbered with different obligations, and we need to understand that. I saw a recent report in the Globe and Mail that talked about how downsizing has been made much more complicated in this market. And it's a little bit counterintuitive, because you think, if I own a big house, that's surely the greatest opportunity. It's never been worth so much. I'll just downsize and fill my pockets with money. But so much of the value increases in the land that, say you get a house that's 1,000 square feet smaller, that lot value is the same as your lot. You're not going to see a huge difference in the house price. And it's a little bit discouraging, because you could pay your realtor X $1,000 and the bank and the lawyer and all that stuff. And how much money do you have left after you've done it? So it's complicated. There is a large knowledge gap in terms of what next steps are for retirees in terms of their housing, what next steps there are for retirees in terms of getting support or going to a place where there is support, or as I mentioned before, a place where there's independent living and some services provided, but not at the care home level. With so few people actually having firsthand knowledge of it by researching it for themselves, I think we sometimes fall victim to the rumors of what it's like without investigating what actually is out there. And then I guess related to all those things is the great need to explore and talk about options and really make sure that we understand what's out there. So that's some of the service that we hope to bring to you by our presentation today, to educate you, our educators, on all the facts related to this issue, and see what we can do.